بعلم ما حوى القمطر ما العلم إلا ما حواه الصدر. I was making progress with my hifz. Every month I was getting closer and closer to finishing the Quran. But even as I was moving forward, I was forgetting what I had memorized previously. When I would stand in prayer and try to recite from memory, I would find it stressful to recall from my previous memorization. I was torn between wanting to memorize more and the necessity to revise the previous parts. And then I watched a video that completely changed my perspective on hifz.
كيف يثبت طالب العلم الحفظ؟ المسألة سهلة.
It was a recording of a Mauritanian sheikh talking about the talib al-ilm and how he should strengthen his memorization. He said in a matter-of-fact way that when the student memorizes a hadith, once he is able to say it from memory, he should then repeat it 500 times. 500 times, I said to myself, do you have any idea how long that would take? It would mean repeating the same hadith over and over again for several hours and for several days. And then he continued. He said, if you do this, you will never forget this hadith even if you lived for 100 years. He then went on to speak about the Quran. He said, if you memorize a hizb, which is half a juz, you should repeat it 500 times. And if you do it 1,000 times, even better. If one wants to do the minimum, then he has to do 250 times. We will come back to these numbers, but this got me thinking. Many of us who claim to have memorized several ajza of the Quran and even all of it, if asked to recite from memory, how much could he recite? The important question I want you to ask yourself is, do you just want to say that you have memorized a certain amount from the Quran, or do you want these ayat in your heart, sure about every letter and able to recall it easily at any time? Allah says, بل هو آيات بينات في صدور الذين أوتوا العلم وما يجحد بآياتنا إلا الظالمون. Isn't it better to memorize a small portion with such thoroughness than to complete the whole Quran and not remember much of it? Now coming back to the number of repetitions, I watched some more videos about the techniques they used in Mauritania and other countries. One of the sheikhs said that they view the minimum amount of repetition that is required when you memorize something is 70 times. The students with him, however, repeat a page 400 times, 100 times facing each direction, north, south, east and west. You might think that this is impossible, but if you do the math, you will find that in an hour, you can repeat a page 30 times, even more if you read a bit faster. This would mean spending several days repeating the same page, and especially if you have a busy schedule, this will take a longer time. But once you're done, inshallah, you will never forget that page again, given that you revisit it occasionally. Our ulama have used such techniques to memorize not only the Quran, but also thousands of ahadith and several primers in various Islamic sciences. This is because they believed that the alim should have the ilm in his heart and not in his books. Imam al-Shafi'i says, علمي معي حيثما يممت ينفعني قلبي وعاء له لا بطن صندوقي إن كنت في البيت كان العلم فيه معي أو كنت في السوق كان العلم في السوق. Ibn Hazm al-Andalusi's books were burned by his enemies, and he said about this, فإن تحرق القرطاس لا تحرق الذي تضمنه القرطاس بل هو في صدري يسير معي حيث استقلت ركائبي وينزل إن أنزل ويدفن في قبري. Ibn al-Ambari was asked, كم تحفظ؟ قال 13 صندوقا, meaning he has memorized enough books to fill 13 crates or chests. It is said that a man from Al-Andalus traveled to Qayrawan in current-day Tunisia and other African countries and learned from its ulama. Then he traveled to Egypt And then he went to Medina and met Imam Malik. He learned from all these places. Then he left to Iraq and took from the ulama there. Finally, he went to Sham and learned from its ulama. And when he wanted to return, he carried a huge library with him on the ship, but in a place known as Tudmir. The ship sank. He escaped with his life, but alas, the books were lost. When he finally reached Al-Andalus, the ulama, the rulers, the students of knowledge, and many prominent others came to visit him. And they congratulated him on being saved and consoled him for the loss of his books. He then stood up amongst them and spoke. And from what he said was, ذهب ما في السطر وبقي ما في الصدر فليسألني من شاء أما شاء. The ulama say, من حفظ المتون حاز الفنون ليس بعلم ما حوى القمطر ما العلم إلا ما هواه الصدر.